Hello, Wake Up New Zealand. Today I'd like to talk about the vulnerable elderly in New Zealand. I'm concerned that the euthanasia bill, if it becomes law, will actually target the elderly. Would we be regulating an assisted suicide law that targets the elderly and the most vulnerable? The vulnerable elderly and assisted suicide, would people be killed who didn't really want to die? People get in different emotional spaces at different times, and it just depends on what's going on around them or in their personal lives. And they can chip and chop from one place to another, feel okay one day or 1 week, and differently the following. So, does assisted suicide on stuff out life on request undermine the value of human life? Because I'm really concerned that it does. The same applies to legalised abortion. It's well recorded by organisations that are linked to the care of the elderly that many elderly suffer emotional neglect, isolation, loneliness, and elder abuse, particularly by family members. Now, I'm not saying all family members do that. There's some very caring, loving family members who care about their elderly, but it's a well-known fact that we do have members of families in New Zealand that are neglecting their elderly. And I got that report from Age Concern New Zealand. So to think that the elderly would be eliminated, their lives, because they feel they're a burden to family, to society, that's extremely sad. But it's a real fact. We flout the stats of youth suicide, but when do we ever talk about the suicide of the elderly? And the elderly, the elderly are committing suicide in New Zealand. But they don't get, these stats don't get reported. It's like some of the elderly are seen as if they have a use by stamp on their forehead. So, the elderly suicide, reporting that, zilch. News reports have recently stated the welfare system in New Zealand is actually failing the elderly. New Zealand as a nation are failing the elderly. Assisted suicide is the cold, callous way New Zealand government could well use this as a law to eliminate the financial burden of the elderly on the state. A survey in the United States stated that 66% of euthanasia requests involve patients who do not want to be a financial burden on their families, on the nation. There is inadequate funding in New Zealand for palliative care and pain management. The government have a huge reliance on nursing homes, and this all contributes to despair felt by those who are elderly. So there is nothing about improving the life of the elderly. So let's look at hospice, for instance. They have to have regular fundraising activities like sausage sizzles so that they can deliver patient care. And those that complain about the baby boomers, they make up the majority of volunteers who work in these aged care organisations like Age Concern. They are run on volunteers. This country is run on volunteers. It's not the government, it's the volunteers of this country. Those baby boomers are the majority of people who are out there who are actually supporting organisations like Age Concern and even in hospice. So Ardern's well-being is really a crock of shit. Ardern brags she's provided a few medical machines for treating cancer patients throughout the country. How about funding medical treatment for those people who marched on Parliament in October 2018, those that were suffering breast cancer, who begged to have their lives extended? Coldly and heartlessly, Miss Ardern let it go over her head. Since then, many people have died from breast cancer. So, we've done no research on the rollout of 5G. We continue to have stockpiles of toxic pesticide, poisonous pesticide of 1080 being spread all over our country. It's just not on. As for the elderly, well, I'm really concerned. I do not support Seymour's euthanasia bill. I just think that it may affect the elderly and the vulnerable, the most vulnerable, and they are going to be the targets for this. I see from a few reports that doctors throughout New Zealand do not want to take that responsibility of killing patients, even if they request that. So we've got to think about that. And this is not a black and white area. It's a very grey area. But I do believe that this actually devalues human life itself. Thank you very much, people.